Human helps the alien girl climb a cliff, and the alien girl says the cliff moved for him alone. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main characters. Jake Anderson stood at the base of the cliff, gazing up at its towering face. The jagged rock seemed to stretch forever, casting long shadows across the valley below. Jake had always loved the challenge of hiking, but today felt different. The air was thicker than usual, carrying an electric charge that made the hair on his arms stand on end. He couldn't explain it, but something about this cliff didn't feel natural. That's when he saw her, Zara, standing near the edge, her eyes scanning the steep incline as if she was searching for something. She wasn't from around here. Jake had encountered her a few hours earlier, when she'd appeared out of nowhere, walking through the woods in a strange, glowing suit. Zara was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Her skin was a soft shade of pale blue, almost translucent, with shimmering silver hair that cascaded around her shoulders like liquid light. Her eyes, large and impossibly dark, seemed to reflect the stars themselves. She looked lost, confused, and at the same time, strangely calm. He had offered to help her, though he had no idea how she had ended up here. She told him that she was from another planet, a place called Zayla, and that her ship had crash-landed in the forest. Now, with no way to contact her people, she had nowhere else to go. Jake had been skeptical at first, but there was something in her voice that made him believe her. And when she asked if he could help her climb this cliff, he didn't hesitate. Zara was trying to scale the cliff, but the more she tried, the more it seemed like the rock was pushing back. She reached out to grab a ledge, but her fingers couldn't find purchase. She made another attempt, but this time, she stumbled backward, her feet slipping on the loose gravel. Jake rushed forward to steady her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern edging his voice. Zara nodded but didn't speak. She looked up at the cliff again, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't right," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The cliff, it moves for you alone." Jake frowned, not understanding what she meant. But before he could ask, Zara placed her hand on the rock face. For a brief moment, the rock seemed to shift ever so slightly, as if they were responding to her touch. Jake stared, wide-eyed. He took a step back, unsure of what he was seeing. Zara turned to him, her expression soft but firm. "You're the key," she said. "Without you, I can't climb." Jake's confusion deepened. "What do you mean? I don't understand." Zara smiled faintly. "The world here, it's not what you think. This place has its own rules. And you, Jake, are part of those rules." He shook his head, still unsure, but Zara's unwavering gaze told him she was telling the truth. Together, they would have to figure out how to move forward, with the mysterious powers of the cliff standing in their way. "I am sure you have many questions, but first, let's keep going with the story." Jake stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing to understand what Zara had just said. The cliff moving for him alone. It made no sense. He had lived in this town his entire life, hiked these mountains more times than he could count, and never once had he encountered anything that even remotely hinted at the supernatural. And yet, here he was, standing next to an alien with blue skin and silver hair, watching a rock wall respond to her touch as if it were alive. "What are you talking about?" Jake asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Zara's gaze was steady as she looked back at him, the same calm expression that had first drawn him in when they met earlier. "This cliff is alive," she said quietly. "Not in the way you understand life, but it reacts to certain energy. And you, Jake, have something that makes it move." Jake looked at the rock face again. The sunlight was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. He could see the way Zara's eyes seemed to glow in the dimming light, the reflection of the stars catching in her silver hair. It was like she was somehow more connected to this place than he was. But what did she mean by energy? He felt the same old pull of adventure stirring in his chest, the part of him that had always been drawn to the unknown. But this was something else entirely. "You're saying that because I'm here," the cliff responds to me. Jake asked, trying to wrap his head around it. Zara nodded, her eyes never leaving the rocky surface ahead. "Yes. You are the key," she said, her voice quiet but intense. Jake shook his head. "I don't get it. How can I be the key?" Zara hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer to him. She reached out and gently placed her hand on his arm. He could feel a faint warmth radiating from her touch, like a distant sun on a summer day. "The world you live in has rules," she said, her voice soft but filled with meaning. "The rules you know are not the only ones that exist. There are others, hidden beneath the surface. And sometimes, certain people, like you, are chosen to interact with those hidden forces." Jake felt a shiver run down his spine as she spoke. It wasn't fear, exactly, but something much deeper, an instinct telling him that Zara was telling him the truth. "And you're telling me that I'm some kind of chosen person?" he asked, still skeptical but intrigued. Zara smiled, a small but knowing smile. "You may not understand it yet, but you are," she said. "This cliff, and others like it, are waiting for someone like you. Someone who can make them move." Jake stood there in silence for a moment, processing everything she had said. It all sounded crazy, but part of him felt that he was on the edge of something monumental. Something bigger than he could imagine. "Okay," he said, finally. "What do we do now?" Zara looked at him, her silver eyes shining with an unreadable expression. "We climb," she said simply. With those words, Jake felt a sense of determination rise within him. This was no longer just about a hike up a mountain. It was something much bigger, something that could change everything. Together, they began to prepare. Jake didn't know what was ahead, but with Zara by his side, he felt like they were ready to face whatever the cliff had in store for them. I don't think Jake had ever been more confused in his life. As they stood at the base of the cliff, preparing to climb, his mind raced. Zara had said they would climb together, but the more he thought about it, the more it felt like there was a piece of the puzzle he was missing. Still, he couldn't deny the strange energy that pulsed through the air, or the way the rock seemed to shimmer whenever Zara was near. He glanced over at her. Zara was already preparing herself, her expression calm and focused, as if she had done this 100 times before. Her long silver hair was pulled back into a loose braid, and she seemed to radiate a quiet confidence that made Jake feel both reassured and strangely inadequate. "You ready?" Zara's voice broke through his thoughts. "Yeah," Jake replied, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. He adjusted the straps on his backpack and took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Zara led the way, her movements graceful and deliberate. She seemed to know exactly where to place her hands and feet, moving up the cliff face with a fluidity that left Jake in awe. Every now and then, she would glance down at him and offer a small nod, as if to encourage him to follow. Jake, on the other hand, was a bit clumsier. He had hiked these mountains before, but scaling a cliff like this was a different challenge altogether. The rocks were sharp and uneven, and there were moments when he thought he might slip. But with each step, he felt something strange happening. The more he climbed, the more it felt like the cliff was helping him, guiding him, almost as if it was shifting to make it easier for him to move upward. "Zara," Jake called up, his voice strained. "I don't know how to explain it, but the rocks, they're changing for me. It's like they're adjusting." Zara paused, glancing back down at him, her silver eyes gleaming with an understanding that made Jake wonder just how much she knew about what was really going on. "It's the energy," she said softly. "The cliff responds to you. But you have to believe in it. You have to trust that it will guide you. Jake didn't fully understand, but as he continued climbing, he couldn't deny the growing sense of connection he felt to the cliff. It wasn't just about his physical strength anymore, it was something deeper. Something that seemed to bind him to this strange, alien world. The higher they climbed, the more surreal it became. The sky above them was turning a deeper shade of purple, and the stars seemed brighter than usual, almost as if they were watching them. The air felt charged with an energy Jake couldn't explain, and with every step, he felt as though he was uncovering something ancient and powerful. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they reached a plateau, a flat ledge that seemed to stretch out into the sky. Jake stopped to catch his breath, his heart racing. He looked around in awe, taking in the breathtaking view of the valley below, the distant mountains, and the dark expanse of the sky above. Zara stood beside him, her face illuminated by the strange glow of the stars. "We're getting close," she said quietly. Jake turned to her, his confusion still evident in his eyes. "Close to what?" Zara smiled, her gaze shifting toward the horizon. "Close to understanding," she said. "Close to discovering why you are here." Jake didn't know what she meant, but for the first time since meeting Zara, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something extraordinary. He didn't know how or why he had become part of this strange journey, but in that moment, he was ready to see it through to the end. I don't think Jake had ever felt more out of place than he did now. The sky was deepening into hues of violet and indigo as the night crept over the landscape. The stars were bright, more than he had ever seen before, as if they were beckoning them forward. Zara, ever calm, stood beside him, her silver hair shimmering in the glow of the night. She had said they were getting close to something, but Jake still didn't fully understand what. The plateau they stood on was vast, a flat expanse of rock that stretched into the horizon. The air around them hummed with an almost imperceptible energy, like a soft buzz. That vibrated in the tips of Jake's fingers. His heart was still racing from the climb, but something else had settled into him, a sense of anticipation, as if the world around him was holding its breath. Zara turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the stars above. "We need to keep going," she said. Jake nodded, though the weight of her words lingered in the air. There was a quiet urgency in her tone, one that told him that time was running out. They couldn't afford to stop now. Together, they started walking toward a narrow path that wound its way up the side of the mountain. The path was rocky, uneven, and barely wide enough for one person, but Zara moved with ease, her steps sure and light. Jake followed closely behind, his eyes on the path ahead but his mind on everything that had led up to this moment. What was this place? Why was he here? And why had the cliff responded to him in a way that he couldn't explain? As they walked, Zara spoke, her voice low but steady. "You are a part of something much larger than you can see right now. This place, this world, is a bridge, a crossing point between different realms. The energy here flows in ways that you don't understand, but it is real. It is what makes this place alive." Jake listened intently, trying to make sense of her words. "So, you mean, this mountain is alive?" he asked, still not fully grasping what she was saying. Zara glanced over her shoulder at him, her expression unreadable. "In a way, yes. Not alive like you or I, but it has a consciousness, a purpose. And you, Jake, are tied to it." Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. "Tied to it," he repeated. "But how?" Zara paused, her gaze moving to the sky above, as if searching for something in the stars. "It's complicated," she said softly. "You are not from this world, Jake. You are here because you were chosen. Your energy, your essence, aligns with this place. That's why the cliff responded to you." Jake was silent for a moment, trying to process her words. "But why me?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara turned to face him, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "I don't know the answer to that," she said. "But I believe you are meant to help, to bridge the gap between worlds. And you are not alone in this journey. Her words echoed in his mind as they continued their ascent. The higher they climbed, the more Jake felt as if the world was shifting around him. He couldn't explain it, but every step they took seemed to bring them closer to something monumental. And for the first time since he met Zara, he truly felt like he was a part of something much bigger than himself. I can't say exactly when it happened, but as Jake and Zara continued their climb, something changed. It wasn't just the air, though it did feel more charged, more alive. It wasn't just the stars, though they seemed brighter now, more like guides than distant points of light. It was the path itself. The rocks beneath their feet seemed to pulse, like they were reacting to their presence, shifting gently, guiding them upward in ways that didn't make sense. With every step, Jake felt a deeper connection to the mountain, to the land itself. And though he couldn't fully explain it, he had begun to trust it. He had begun to trust Zara, too. They were walking in silence now, their footsteps the only sound in the vast expanse of the mountain. Zara led, but Jake was no longer just following her. He felt like he was walking alongside her, sharing in this journey, this strange adventure that he had never asked for but somehow felt destined for. They had passed through the last of the trees, and now they were on the edge of an open, rocky expanse that stretched for miles. The view was breathtaking. Below them, the valley spread out like a patchwork quilt, the distant lights of the town flickering far in the distance. Above, the sky was a deep, swirling indigo, with stars twinkling like diamonds in the vast, endless canvas. Jake could barely tear his eyes away. He had seen the stars before, of course. He'd seen the night sky countless times, but never like this. Never so close. Never so alive. Zara stopped, and Jake followed suit. She turned to him, her silver eyes glowing in the dim light. "We're close now," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet sense of urgency. "This is where it all begins." Jake didn't speak right away. Instead, he took in the view, the vastness of the landscape stretching before him. He felt small, yet connected, like part of something greater than himself. For the first time since meeting Zara, he wasn't scared. He wasn't confused. He just felt right. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice steady but full of questions. Zara turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the last remnants of daylight were fading. "Now, we make the final connection," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "The cliff, it's a doorway. And you, Jake, are the key." Jake frowned. "A doorway to where?" Zara didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped forward, her boots crunching on the gravel beneath them. She raised her hand, and for a moment, it seemed like the air itself responded. The sky above them rippled, the stars flickering in an almost rhythmic pattern. The ground beneath their feet trembled ever so slightly, as if the earth itself was waking up. Jake's breath caught in his throat. What is that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the horizon, her expression unreadable. "It's time," she said simply. "It's time to open the door." Jake didn't know what to do. He had no idea what was happening, but he felt it, he felt the pull, the energy gathering, building. It was like standing on the edge of something monumental, something that would change everything. "Do you trust me, Jake?" Zara's voice broke through his thoughts, calm and steady. He looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. Zara nodded. "Then follow me." With that, she took another step forward, and Jake, with nothing left to do but trust her, followed. I can't explain exactly what happened next, but it felt like the world around them shifted, like the air was thick with the promise of something ancient awakening. Jake followed Zara without question, his feet moving almost on their own as they stepped onto the rocky surface in front of them. It was as though the path itself was guiding them, aligning their steps with the heartbeat of the mountain. The sky above seemed to be pulsing in rhythm with the ground beneath their feet, the stars flickering faster now, almost as if they were urging them on. Zara moved ahead with a grace that Jake could only admire. Her silver eyes were fixed on the horizon, but there was a quiet determination in the way she moved, as though she knew exactly what was about to happen. Jake, on the other hand, felt more like a spectator in his own body. His heart raced in his chest, not from fear, but from the growing sense that he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't fully comprehend. "Do you feel it?" Zara's voice broke through his thoughts. "Feel what?" Jake asked, still trying to make sense of everything. "The connection," Zara replied. "It's growing stronger. This place is waking up." Jake's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of what she meant. The rocks beneath their feet seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light, as though they were alive, responding to Zara's presence. The stars above twinkled more brightly now, swirling in a pattern that felt both familiar and completely foreign. "What is this place?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara stopped and turned to face him, her expression serious. "This is where everything begins," she said. "The cliff, the energy, the connection between worlds, it all comes together here." She reached out and placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "You are a part of something much larger than yourself, Jake. This mountain is the gateway, and you," she paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "You are the key to unlocking it." Jake's mind was racing, trying to process everything Zara had said. But before he could ask another question, the ground beneath them trembled. It was a gentle shake at first, but it grew stronger with each passing second, until the very earth seemed to pulse with life. The air around them felt charged, like static before a thunderstorm, and the stars overhead began to swirl faster, drawing closer to the ground. Zara's eyes widened, but there was no fear in her gaze. Instead, there was a calm acceptance, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "It's time," she said, her voice steady. "Hold on to me, Jake." Without hesitation, Jake reached out, his hand finding hers. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of energy coursed through him. It was unlike anything he had ever felt, warm, powerful, and alive. It felt like the mountain itself was reaching into him, awakening something deep within him that had been dormant. The ground beneath them trembled again, but this time, it wasn't just the earth that was shaking. It was everything, the very fabric of reality seemed to be shifting. The stars, the sky, the air around them, it was all coming alive in a way Jake couldn't explain. And then, without warning, the cliff in front of them began to shift. The rocks, once stationary, began to move, almost as if they had a mind of their own. They parted to reveal a hidden passageway, a narrow opening in the rock that seemed to lead deep into the heart of the mountain. Jake's breath caught in his throat. "What is that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Zara looked at him, her silver eyes glowing brighter than ever. "It's the doorway," she said. "The one we've been waiting for." With that, she began to move toward the opening, and Jake, still reeling from the overwhelming surge of energy, followed. I don't know what Jake expected when they entered the hidden passage, but it wasn't this. The narrow opening in the rock had led them into a vast, hollowed-out cavern, far larger than Jake could have ever imagined. The walls of the cave shimmered with a soft, ethereal light, casting an almost otherworldly glow on everything around them. The air inside was cool and thick with the same energy that had surrounded them on the mountain, but now, it felt different, heavier, more concentrated. Zara moved ahead of him, her silver eyes scanning the surroundings. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, like she had walked these paths 1,000 times before. Jake, on the other hand, felt like an intruder, completely out of place in this strange, luminous world. "What is this place?" Jake asked, his voice echoing slightly in the cavern. Zara didn't turn to him but continued walking, her steps light but purposeful. "This is the heart of the mountain," she said, her voice low but steady. "This is where the energy flows the strongest. It is where the veil between worlds is thinnest." Jake followed her, trying to make sense of her words. He had no idea what she meant by the veil between worlds, but the deeper they went, the more he felt like he was crossing into another realm, one he wasn't meant to understand. As they moved through the cavern, Jake noticed strange symbols etched into the walls, glowing softly in the dim light. They weren't anything like the markings he had ever seen before, not something from any language he knew. They seemed to pulse with life, as if the cavern itself was breathing. "What are those?" Jake asked, pointing to the symbols. Zara glanced back at him, a faint smile on her lips. "They are part of the same energy," she explained. "They represent the connection between our worlds. They're not just markings. They are part of the key." Jake's mind raced. The key to what? Zara didn't answer immediately. She kept walking, her focus still fixed on the path ahead. The further they went, the more the air seemed to hum, the energy becoming almost palpable. It was like something was calling to him, urging him forward, but Jake didn't know what it was. Suddenly, they reached a massive chamber at the heart of the cavern. The walls of the chamber stretched high into the darkness, and at its center stood a large, smooth stone pedestal. It was unlike anything Jake had ever seen, carved from the same glowing rock as the walls, but with intricate designs etched into its surface. The pedestal seemed to radiate power, and Jake could feel it even from where he stood. "This is it," Zara said, turning to face him. Her silver eyes gleamed with intensity. "This is where the connection will be made. And you, Jake, are the one who must unlock it." Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. How? How am I supposed to do that? Zara stepped closer to him, placing her hand gently on his arm. "You are the key," she said softly. "You just have to believe. The energy will guide you." Jake's heart raced as he stared at the pedestal. He didn't know how he was supposed to do this. He didn't even understand what was happening. But he knew one thing: he was here for a reason. And he was about to find out what that reason was. Slowly, almost instinctively, he stepped toward the pedestal. The moment his hand made contact with the stone, the cavern seemed to hold its breath. The symbols on the walls flared brighter, and the air around them vibrated with energy. Jake could feel something stirring deep. Within him, something ancient, something powerful. The pedestal began to hum, and for a split second, Jake wondered if the mountain was going to swallow them whole. But then, with a sudden flash of light, everything around them went still. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe a few seconds, maybe hours, but when the light finally faded, everything around them was different. Jake blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim glow that now filled the cavern. The pedestal before him had stopped humming, but the air was still thick with energy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Zara stood beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the faint glow that seemed to pulse from the stone. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she turned slowly, as if waiting for something. Jake felt a deep sense of change, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted around him. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but he knew it was important. He stepped back from the pedestal, his fingers still tingling from the contact. The symbols on the walls had grown brighter, more defined, and the energy in the air felt almost like static, like the anticipation before a storm. "What now?" Jake asked, his voice breaking the silence. Zara took a deep breath, her expression calm but filled with an intensity that Jake couldn't ignore. "Now, we wait," she said, her voice soft but firm. Jake glanced around, trying to make sense of everything. The cavern had changed, but how? What exactly had they unlocked? The walls were no longer just glowing with symbols, they were alive, shifting, moving with a subtle rhythm, as if they were breathing. "Wait for what?" Jake asked, feeling the tension in the air growing thicker with each passing second. Zara didn't immediately answer. She reached out with her hand, and the air around them shimmered. For a moment, the cavern seemed to stretch, the walls warping and shifting in ways that Jake couldn't explain. He reached out, his hand instinctively moving toward Zara's, and as their fingers touched, something inside him clicked. The connection, the energy, it was all coming together. He felt the power surge again, but this time, it was different. It was familiar, almost comforting. It was as if the mountain itself was guiding him, teaching him, and in that moment, he understood. He wasn't just part of this world. He was meant to be here. The stars outside seemed to pulse in time with the energy surrounding them. Zara turned to him, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. "The gateway is open," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "We've done it." Jake felt a rush of emotions, relief, awe, confusion, but most of all, he felt a deep sense of purpose, like everything in his life had led to this exact moment. "What happens now?" he asked again, his voice steady but filled with wonder. Zara's gaze softened. "Now, you will understand." She stepped back, and Jake watched as she moved toward the center of the cavern. The air seemed to part around her, as if she were walking through something unseen, and for the first time, Jake realized that Zara was more than just a guide. She was part of this world, part of this energy, and in some strange way, so was he. She stopped in front of the pedestal, and for a moment, everything around them fell still. The cavern held its breath, as if waiting for something. Zara raised her hand once more, and the symbols on the walls flared to life, illuminating the entire cavern with an intensity that made Jake's heart race. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for hers once more. This time, it felt right. Everything felt right. As their hands touched, the world around them seemed to collapse and expand at the same time. The walls of the cavern shifted, and the light grew so bright that Jake had to close his eyes. When he opened them again, the cavern was gone. The mountain was gone. Everything was gone. And in its place was a vast, open sky, stretching as far as the eye could see, with stars shining brightly above, closer than he had ever seen them before. I don't know how long they stood there, Jake and Zara, in the middle of this vast expanse under the stars. The ground beneath their feet wasn't the solid rock they had once known, it was soft, like the grass of a meadow, and it hummed with the same energy that had surrounded them in the cavern. The air felt lighter, easier to breathe, as if the weight of the world had been lifted. Zara, standing beside him, looked more at home here than Jake could ever imagine. Her silver eyes were glowing with the same intensity they had before, but now, they held something else, something deeper. "Where are we?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The sky above them was endless, a deep black canvas dotted with stars brighter than any he had ever seen. They were closer now, so much closer than they had ever been before, as if the universe itself was reaching down to embrace them. Zara turned toward him, her gaze soft, but still intense. "We are in the space between," she said, her voice low and calm. "Between worlds, between realms. You've crossed the threshold." Jake's heart was racing again, but this time it wasn't fear, it was awe. He had felt the energy of the mountain, the cavern, but this was different. This felt infinite. He could feel it pulsing all around him, inside of him, like he was becoming part of everything. "How did we get here?" he asked, his mind still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of it all. Zara smiled, a small, knowing smile. "You did it. You unlocked the door. You're the key, Jake. You always have been." Jake shook his head, not fully understanding. "I don't remember anything about being the key. I don't understand any of this." Zara's expression softened. She stepped closer to him, her presence calm and grounding. "You don't have to understand all at once. But this is your purpose. The energy you felt in the mountain, in the cavern, it was always leading you here, to this moment." Jake looked around, taking in the scene. The landscape around them was unlike anything he had ever seen. There were no mountains or trees, no familiar shapes, just a vast expanse of light and space that stretched infinitely in every direction. The stars above weren't just lights, they were alive, swirling in patterns that seemed to change with every blink. It was like standing in the center of the universe, with everything revolving around him. So, what happens now? Jake asked, still trying to grasp it all. Zara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to something beyond the realm of the physical world. When she opened them again, her gaze was full of purpose. Now, you must make your choice. Jake looked at her, confusion flooding his chest. My choice? What choice? Zara's eyes met his, filled with a deep understanding. The energy you've awakened is powerful, Jake. It can create, it can destroy. But it must be guided. And that is where you come in. You have to decide how it will be used. Jake took a step back, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was bigger than anything he could have imagined. How am I supposed to know what to do? He asked, his voice shaking slightly. Zara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch steady and reassuring. You've already been given the answers. It's all within you, Jake. Trust yourself. Trust the energy. He stood there, feeling the pull of something deep within, something that had always been there, just waiting for him to notice. He didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, he knew one thing for sure, he was ready to face it. Together with Zara, he would figure it out. They were no longer just two strangers from different worlds. They were a part of something much larger, and whatever came next, they would face it together.